Hello, and welcome to another installment of At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a platform where we will learn from people who come from different walks of life, careers, and experiences, but all share one thing in common. They have stepped fully into the transformative power of saying yes to the unexpected turns of their lives, and they are now using the power of their voice or podium to make an impact on the world we live in today. At the Podium is the intersection of art, culture, and big thoughts wrapped up in good old-fashioned conversation. Today, I'm thrilled and humbled to share the podium with Quentin Vennie. Quentin, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It is a real honor to have you here today. I want to get right into it because I have a lot of questions for you about your life and your book. And I wanted to talk to you today about your work in suicide prevention, equity, and your role as a father. And I know the word, and I used it in the bio, in the intro, I know the word intersectionality gets used often today. But I feel like that word applies to where and how you and I met. And that is in this sphere of wellness. In your memoir, you write, I grew up in a world where certain things were valued and others weren't, where we had access to things like liquor stores, fast food, and minimum wage jobs, but we were excluded from the things we really needed, like quality healthcare, financial literacy, and first-rate educations. As a Black man raised in an impoverished neighborhood by a single mother, I was not exposed to even the most basic forms of health and wellness. And so the irony is not lost on me that I have spent the last 20 years of my life working in the luxury spa world that caters to people who can afford wellness as a regular, necessary part of their lives. But in this book, you describe your world in Baltimore almost as a wellness desert. Can you speak to this?
Absolutely. It's interesting, right? To even go back to the word of intersectionality, right? I think when you grow up in an impoverished community, if you can't hear, this is my daughter's in the background. When you grow up in these types of neighborhoods where you don't have high quality education, you don't have access to, nutrient dense foods, there's an intersectionality there as well with poverty and sickness, right? Poverty and disease, poverty and illness. Essentially, I grew up in a food desert. There was one grocery store in a 7 to 10 mile radius. That grocery store didn't hold or house organic broccoli and kale, right? There were no green juices and smoothies, right? It was vegetables that looked already dead when you picked them up, right? It wasn't even visually appealing. You could see mice running through the grocery store. There were flies, perched on the apples. It didn't make healthy food even look appealing, right? And so when you have that as your visual aid, then you go and have a Checkers and a McDonald's and a Burger King and a carry-out Chinese store. There were 5 Chinese restaurants, Chinese carryouts, in like 2 blocks, right? You had a liquor store on one corner and then a pharmacy on another, and then a gas station, and then a pharmacy, and then another liquor store across the street from that, right? Like there were 3 liquor stores in a 2-block radius. The idea was to perpetuate sickness and disease, right? You have your liquor store and then your pharmacy, right? You have your addiction, right? And then your treatment, but that treatment often leads to other diseases, right? And so it was a cesspool of sickness and disease matched with ignorance and a lack of education. And I say ignorance in the realm of lack of education. So we were set up to fail.
It's interesting that you talk about, and you talk about it so beautifully in your book. You talk about, and you described it as almost a trinity of disease, where you have a liquor store and you have a fast food place and you have a pharmacy. And then through the course of your life, you switch that trinity into yoga, juicing, and meditation. And that really is the journey of Strong in the Broken Places.
That is 100% the journey, right? It's like, we find strength in our brokenness, right? And coming from that type of environment, I was born into a broken community, right? A broken community from society standards, right? A broken community from being broken away from resources and opportunities. The community in itself was a community filled with love, right? I still have family that live in that community. I still have, and I say family loosely. I don't always mean relatives. I mean people that have my back and I have theirs, people that have shown up for me in the way that I've shown up for them, right? I still go back to that community. There's still love there. I was just there a month ago, right? I have the privilege to never go back, right? Financially, I have the privilege to never go back, but it would be a disservice to not. It would be a disservice to me, and it would be a disservice to the individuals, the young, ladies and gentlemen that are growing up in that community as well, to not see someone that comes from where they come from, that live the life that they live, exceed beyond society's expectations.
I want to talk about the book. It's your memoir, Strong in the Broken Places. But to me, Quentin, it really read as a manifesto of what is possible for the spirit and the soul to achieve. I want to ask you, was it grace that helped you survive a life that you really should have ended up as a statistic?
Yeah, I think it was grace. I think it was a testament to the fact that prayer works. I think that it's a testament to the fact that prayer without works is dead. Um, and it is a testament to the resilience that we have as human beings, more importantly as Black people, right? This book wasn't. It was a blessing to be able to write it about my life, but I was speaking for everybody that looks like me. I was speaking for everyone who comes from where I come from, anyone who can relate to trauma, to trial, but also, to triumph. Um, I wanted people to be able to see the human being that existed in me, to help them see the human being that existed in themselves, because society doesn't remind us of our humanity. It often strips us away from it, right? And so my vulnerability um, enables me the opportunity to connect and identify with somebody else's humanity by showing mine.
And that's really, you hit the nail on the head for me in terms of what I want this platform to be, is that when we share stories, we share humanity. And that's the way that we start to see each other, not as you, them, us, y'all, but we see each other as one group of people, one species having a lived experience at this particular time together on the planet. Because that's how we get
100%.
through it, I think.
100%. I think I often say, in workshops and in keynotes, like if we took away all of the things that society gave us to separate us, right? Organized religion, gender identities, race, all of these socioeconomics, if we strip away all of these things, we're all the same, right? It's our lived experience that makes us different.
I wanted to ask you, because the book, there's an interesting trajectory in the book. You grow up, your father is 17 when you're born. He's there somewhat, as I guess as much as a 17-year-old can be there for a child when they're 17. And then he gets really caught up in the world of drug abuse and addiction, and you see the impact on you as a child living through that. And there are some poignant moments in the book, when your father gets beat up and you come to see him and he's laying on the sofa, and I think it's your great grandmother's home.
My great grandmother's home. Yep.
And he's bleeding and he won't even look at you. And you have this impulse in the book that you describe to go to him and try to be with him. And then not too long after you graduate from high school, you end up selling drugs and becoming a pretty significant drug dealer along the East Coast of the US. And I'm curious in terms of how do you view that symmetry that sort of happened there? And also, is there a sense of guilt? And if you had to move through that in terms of your healing process, about the lives that you may have impacted, who you were selling drugs to at that time? I don't know how do you reconcile that within yourself today?
Uh, it's interesting. I often think about this, and I've never been asked that question. Um, that's a powerful question to ask, because I think I still battle with that every day, right? Like I still battle with, and I say this, to not get emotional, not because I'm afraid of it, but because I want to be able to eloquate this um, properly. Um, um, I think that fuels the work I do today, right? That's how I reconcile it. I'll never go back and have the ability to apologize. Ugh. Mm. I'll never have the ability to go back and apologize for the lives that I negatively impacted during that time. To apologize to the children whose parents, I was supplying, um, because I know those children. I was that child, right? I'll never have the ability to do that. And I think that motivates and pushes me, um, for everything that I do now, right? Because I can't change those lives. I feel an anointed responsibility, um, to change other people's, right? To be a
Mhm.
beacon of possibility and hope. Um, I try not to live my life with regret, right? Because it's through those experiences that, um, has allowed me to grow and become the person that I am today, to do the work that I do today, to make the impact in the world that I do today. And it's because of having context, right?
Mhm.
It's because of those mistakes, it's because of those decisions that I can look back subjectively, um, and make the conscious decision to be the opposite.
Mhm.
Um, I also can't apologize for doing what I needed to do or what I felt I needed to do in the moment to survive. And you know, and so there is a dynamic there, that I still struggle with. Um, I still sometimes experience survivor's guilt. Um, I still um, am unsure of the full and complete um, discord and challenge that I created during that time. And it's unfortunate that my means of survival um, meant the potential detriment of someone else's livelihood. And so, I didn't shy away from being honest in the book, um, because I wanted someone to eventually ask me that question so that I could then explain further. And so you just did that. So if for selfish reasons, I thank you for that.
I thank you for answering the question. And I think the other side of that question, and it runs throughout your book, is the idea of forgiveness. And I don't know how I had an absent father, um, for many reasons. And I think many people have absent parents in their lives. And it is something that 50 years old that I still struggle with today, is really
Mm.
sort of, how do I forgive that? And I think part of what makes the book so powerful is that the journey of your life through all of this really comes down to this essence of how do you forgive yourself, and how do you forgive others, and how do you move forward? And forgiveness seems to be the vehicle through which this happens.
Yeah, I think I've come to realize, right, that we don't forgive for other people, we forgive for ourselves, right? You know, we've been conditioned to believe that forgiving someone else means that you also have to tolerate the nonsense that they bring, right? But I also think that forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools to truly healing your trauma, right? It's also the idea of accepting the apology you'll never receive, right? When it comes to other people, like that's what forgiveness is to me. Accepting the apology you'll never receive. What I didn't write in the book is that I was sexually molested by a neighbor's son at 7, right? I had to grow up, you know, for a lot of my formative years questioning my own sexuality, you know, and then loving this person's family so much that I would never tell them what had happened, because I would never want his parents to look down upon him, right, and question their child, right, and so I had to accept the apology that I would never get, because if I didn't, I would be walking around carrying that burden, um, that ultimately led me to discovering who I truly was, right? When so much of my life I was fighting against it, trying to fit into these categories and these ideals that I had never accepted for myself.
Is your father alive today?
Is
And have you been able to reconcile that relationship, or is it still in
yeah,
process?
no, I've been able to build the relationship with my father that I want. You know, he missed the opportunity to be a dad, right? Like I've never called a man dad in my entire life, you know. And so when I hear it from my own kids, it means that much more. But it's also something that I'll never understand, right? I'll never understand what that feels like, um, and I'm fine with that, because I was able to create that for somebody else, for my own children, and so there were a lot of things that he missed, and he'll never be able to get that back. Um, but I forgive him for his mistakes. I forgive him for not being there when I needed him, because it taught me how to be there for myself. Right. All of the things that he wasn't able to provide for me, I am now able to provide for my children.
Hmm.
And the way my life has turned out, who would I not be? Who would I be to not forgive him?
I wanted to ask you because I think it's a question that we as Black men and Black people should be having, is this idea, this world of addiction and poverty and despair is a tale that is told over and over again by so many Black people in this country. And I wonder how you view it and how you think about how we as a community can begin to write new stories for ourselves, begin to have new expectations of what Black life is in America.
Yeah, I think we're doing that. I think we're starting that process. I think, when we stop allowing other people to shape our narrative and we take back power and control over what that is, there's a part of us that's been lost that we'll never get back. And that's our history, right? We'll never know the full depth and beauty of our ancestry. If you're in America, we'll never know it. It's been erased. You know, it's probably in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, right? Like, unless we have some divers that can retrieve some things, right? We'll never know the depth of that. And that's difficult. But what's beautiful is it gives us an amazing opportunity to create a new history, right? For the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. So when they are in school and they are reading these historical texts, it doesn't start with slavery, right? It starts with success. It starts with you come from this stock, from this fabric. You are built from this. Greatness is in your bloodline, right?
Mm.
It starts there, right? And then it goes from that point. For us, we were told our history started with slavery. We were never told about the history prior to slavery, right? America is a very young country. Africa's not. We were never taught about that, right? And so we have the ability to create a new history, right? We are the new ancestors, and I think it's a beautiful opportunity and experience that we have right now, and I think we're doing it. I think we're continuing to do it. There are more Black men are speaking up about their feelings, about their vulnerability, walking away from this idea of toxicity that has been placed upon us by groups of people that that America's system was designed to support, and it wasn't us. Um, Celebrities are talking about it. You know, everyday, individuals are talking about it. We're challenging each other in productive ways, right? And so, though we may still have a long way to go as a culture, because we've been programmed to be segregated within our own group, within our own communities. I think we're making some pretty amazing headway.
One of the best parts of the book, and it kind of it moved me, was when your mom went to yoga class with you. It just speaks about the power of a mother and the kind of support that we all want and need from our mothers. But it really was a beautiful turning point for you. And it seems that that was really a trajectory that really sort of helped bring us to where we are today.
Yeah. What's interesting is that my mother didn't know how bad it was for me, right? She didn't know how badly I needed that support. Um, like I needed that. I was fighting for my life and nobody knew but me. Um, and so uh she had also experienced, she knew that things weren't, you know, copacetic. Right? She knew that things were challenging. She had, come to my house and was supposed to take me out for lunch, and I was balled up in the corner crying, uncontrollably for no reason. Right? It wasn't no reason. I was having an anxiety attack, but you know, um, she saw me in my weakest state. She didn't understand it. She didn't know what it was. Um, I didn't really know what it was, and so knowing who I've always been a strong-willed individual. I used to get in trouble in school all the time because they would be the ones telling me Christopher Columbus was a hero, and I was like, no, you're lying, and we shouldn't be celebrating, this homicidal maniac. Lincoln didn't free the slaves because he thought slavery was bad. He freed us because he wanted us to go back to Africa so America could be white. Like I was that guy, you know, and this is middle school, and so I've always been vocal. I've always been strong-willed, and during that time I was a shell of myself.
Mm.
I couldn't stand up for anything. I was afraid to drive if there wasn't a hospital close by, right? Like I had become enslaved to my disorder. And so when my mother started to see me slowly crawling out of that space, I think her coming wasn't just her way of being like, "I support you," but uh, it was her way of saying, "I celebrate you."
The way you describe and write about your addiction in the book was the first time that I've read a book about addiction where I I literally felt how trapped you were in that system of antidepressants and alcohol. And I wanted to go find the doctor who prescribed those pills to you and punch him in the face because you were able to capture in the book how trapped you were, and how in the moment, I think you were in the car outside the hospital and the doctor's like, just take him. And you just said you just wept. And it was like everything at that moment failed you. The doctors who we're supposed to believe in are helping us. We're really literally writing the prescriptions and saying, you just take them. And that is a profound moment.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like it's like we look at addiction like a disease, right? Rightfully so, because it is. It's a disease. But more than a disease, right? It is like being trapped in a house with everything that you're afraid of and you can't get out. No one wants to be an addict, right? No one wakes up and says, you know what, I'm just gonna go shoot some heroin a day because I just want to be a drug addict, right? Like no one, and then I consider myself to be the accidental addict because I didn't start taking anxiety pills because I wanted to get high. I started taking pills because I wanted to get help. I didn't want to numb, right? Um, I wanted a solution. Um, and so we're taught at a very young age, and I remember in like the 80s and 90s, they were like to say no to drug commercials, and you had the kid walking, from school, and he has a buddy that's like wearing baggy clothes and a hoodie, and or he got three guys in South Central California standing on the fence, in their Reebok Classics trying to give this kid coming from school a joint. And so society had already told us that the drug dealers we needed to look out for looked like us. The drug dealers that we needed to look out for wore the same clothes we wore, had the same skin color that we have. They lived in the same neighborhoods that we come from. They never told us that the drug dealers that would impact our lives in so many ways have PhDs. They have lab coats. They have the ability to write prescriptions, right? We are nothing more than experiments. And I wanted, medicine in so many ways, and this isn't to discredit medicine because I think it can be life-saving, but it can also be life-altering. Prescription drug addiction is one of the highest, is one of the highest rated, addictions in this country, right? And so uh, if we're going to talk about it, right, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it in all facets. Not everybody is looking to escape. Some people are looking for help, right? And so you said it perfectly. The medical system failed me. It completely failed me. Um, and to this day, I still look at it with skepticism. Um, but I knew I wouldn't fail myself. And that's what and that's what I teach, right? Like before you start asking other people the questions, seek them for yourself. Because I can almost guarantee that 70 to 80% of the questions that you are wondering, you already have the answers to, or you have access to them, right? It's always easier. My therapist often says, like, advice is the thing we ask when we know the answer and don't want to accept it. And that's what we do a lot, right? This idea of like, I don't know where to start and I don't know what to do. Um, we never look at ourselves first. We look for someone else to give us the answer without first discovering what it could be on our side. You know, Medicine today is based off of statistics and data, right? And so if 10 people come to one doctor with a migraine, and that doctor has prescribed, this migraine medicine to all 10 patients, and the 11th patient comes in with the same prognosis, chances are he's going to die. He's going to prescribe that same medicine because the last 10 people it worked. It never looks at the individual. It only looks at the data, right? And so we have to get to a point in our lives where we're looking at ourselves as individuals and not as statistical data. Um, and that's what wellness is to me.
How did you move from that first yoga class to where you are today with equity? What was that journey?
How did I move? I moved intentionally. I moved steadily, um, and I moved with velocity. Right? When you go through a space where your life is on the line and you're at a point in your life where you don't even trust yourself. When I made the decision that I was going to fight to live instead of living to die, there was nothing that was going to stop me. And there were a lot of things that were put in my direction. What a lot of people don't know is, shortly after the book was released, I ended a relationship. I was homeless for 3 months. I was living in hotels, so while I'm going around and I'm, having book events and I'm giving these conversations about the book, I'm going back to hotels. Like I didn't have a stable place to live at the time, right? Um, by October of that year, I walked away from the wellness space altogether. We're talking, my book came out in May, and I think it was May, yeah, May of 2017. I was working at a car dealership by October because I had had enough. I was done, right? The wellness space and what I was being exposed to, and um, the ego and um, the just the inhumanity that existed in the space amongst people that claimed that they were healers, right? I was disgusted and was like, this is not, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. you know I didn't get back into the it didn't last long, because then, right before Christmas, I got an offer to become a program director for a program for an organization in New York City that was, teaching yoga and mindfulness in schools throughout 5 boroughs, right? And so it was like, even then I was like, you know what, God, thank you for saving my life, but I'm done. I want to be regular. I want to be normal, right? I want to go home and eat dinner every day at the table. Like, I don't want this life of, of uncertainty, of extraordinary uncertainty that you've placed upon me. I'm done. I was fired from that car dealership job, not because I wasn't good at it, but because I refused to accept the standards that they had put on me. Um, and within 2 weeks of being fired, I had already gotten a job back doing what I do best, bridging a gap and bringing people to wellness. And I haven't stopped from that, And so, again, like when you step out on this mission to identify what it is that God has set out for your life, and what your anointing is, and what your purpose is, and what your passions are, um, even God won't let you give up on yourself.
And how do people step out? Because I think so many people they feel the anointing, they know it's something else, and they can't move into that space.
Yeah,
How do people do that?
I think for me, and it may sound extreme, but I think like you have to be willing to risk everything to gain anything, right? It's like you have to be, whatever we're anointed to do. It's not going to be easy, right? Like it's not going. We're not. God's not going to anoint us to be a painter, and all of a sudden we become Basquiat, right? Like Basquiat was homeless at once too, right? Basquiat wasn't Basquiat until after his death, right? And so, you know, what it is that we are set to do is often the most challenging thing that it is for us to do. It's fear that keeps us from our anointing, right? It's fear and anxiety of the uncertain, right? Like that's what does it. It stops us in our tracks, right? You have fight, flight, freeze, right? Most of the time, when it comes to doing the thing that we are intended to do, we fight and we freeze and we flee. We go back to what's normal. We go back to, and normal doesn't always mean good. Normal simply means familiar, right? Even in relationships, if you're used to being with someone that's combative and that's stressful, you'll get to the point where stress becomes your new normal. Chaos becomes your new normal. I can sleep peacefully at night listening to gunshots. A person that came from the suburbs can't, but that's my normal, right? And so I think we've allowed ourselves to get so caught up in what we deem to be normal that we miss the opportunity to be extraordinary.
Yeah. Tell me, what is equity and how did Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow enter your life?
um, Equity is my tea company. You know, it's a tea company that my wife and I started. We launched January of this year. It was started as a result of our son's ADHD diagnosis. He was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 7, and because of what happened with me in my journey with medication and all of that, you know, I made the conscious decision to manage his diagnosis holistically and naturally. But as he got older, you know, he found it super challenging to focus, to retain information. Reading was hard, you know. And so went to his neurologist and spoke to her, and she was like, "Well, listen, one thing you can try is let him drink 2 ounces of green tea like 30 minutes before a test, you know, or a big assignment." And the idea is that a lot of the chemical compounds that make up drugs like Adderall are very similar to the chemical compounds in caffeine. And by giving him a controlled dosage, right, or a controlled amount, a reduced amount, the idea was that his body would metabolize it very much in the way that it would Adderall. Like if you give Adderall to a person who doesn't have ADHD, they'll be all over the place. You give it to a person with ADHD, it helps them focus. You give, you know, caffeine to a person who doesn't struggle with focus issues, they'll be, you know, like just Starbucks people, like, you know, zoom in and out all day long. Um, you give it to a person that you know, struggles with focus, it'll help them. And so that was the idea, that was the theory, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went out and bought every green tea that I could find on the shelves at grocers. You know, I was like, all right, let me get every combination because I heard green tea is disgusting, right? We grew up drinking black tea, you know, and mint tea and chamomile. That was the three, had nothing else, right? And so not surprisingly, every green tea he tried, he hated it. He was like, it's nasty, it's just bitter, it's sour, it's, you know, it's strong, I don't like it. And so I was like, okay, well, if we're gonna make this work, if we're gonna at least try it, right, to get it to see if it can work, let me do some research. So we did some research, figured out the different types of green teas, where they come from. You have some from Japan, some from China, right? You have, you know, just the way they're processed, the way they're steeped, the steeping times and steeping temperatures, the flavor profiles, like all of these things. It was fascinating. And so through trial and error, we were able to come up with a blend, which is now our Awaken blend. It's our #1 best-selling blend. And he loved that blend. You know, it was a blend of green tea with lavender and lemon verbena, lemongrass, and, you know, steeped perfectly, and, you know, topped it off with a little pinch of honey to boost those flavor profiles up a little bit. And then it kind of went from there, right? It was like, okay, you know, we wanted to see how it would work for him. And within the year, for the first time in his life, he got on the honor roll and was like, okay, you know, I'm never going to say like the tea did it. But it contributed. It gave him a ritual. It gave him something to look forward to. It gave him something that he knew, you know, he could do this to help combat this thing here, right? And so we did that, and then, you know, because of my anxiety, I've struggled with insomnia, right? And so started researching different herbs and roots and plants that could actually help with insomnia, and came up with a blend there. You know, I've also struggled with seasonal allergies for the majority of my life. Wanted to find different things that could, like astragalus root, like burdock root, like tulsi, right? The peppermint that could help with seasonal allergies, and created a blend, you know, called Breathe right there. And so, you know, within a few months, you know, my wife and I had like 7 different teas that we were just drinking as a family, you know. And I walked away from my job as an executive. I was depleted from doing race equity coaching, um, and came up with the crazy idea and was like, hey, we have these 7 different teas. They're working for our family. Let's start a tea company. Let's make these teas accessible to other people who we know are struggling with the same thing that we're struggling with. You can't find these teas on the shelves at your grocer yet, right? Like they didn't have them when we were looking for them, and so we created what we needed, and as a result, you know, we were able to begin growing a company. Um, Gwyneth and Goop, you know, you know, I think Gwyneth is one of the most selfless individuals I've ever met in my life. Um, how she gives of herself when she doesn't have to, right? It's remarkable. And we had followed each other on social media. I slid in her DMs initially to ask if I could write an article for Goop, because you know, I'm a published author. I'd written, you know, articles for Mind Body Green and Huffington Post and Thrive Global and all of these places. And she was very responsive and was like, hey, I think you're dope. I think the work that you do is super cool. I'll plug you in, you know, to work on an article. Um, and we went through that process. And while going through that process of working on the article, I was like, hey, by the way, I'm also starting a tea company. Would love for you to try some of our teas just to see what you think. And she was open to it. And I sent her some. She loved it. But before she even told me she liked it, it was already on her Instagram stories. You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, she's digging this. She's enjoying this. And you know, from there, a beautiful friendship has spawned, and you know, has been established. And you know, I was like, hey, you know, as a result of your support, I think it would be awesome to create a few blends straight for Goop. She was like, oh, I would love that idea. You're so kind. You know, we created 3 blends that are exclusive to Goop. Um, and um, and things just continue to grow from there.
Quentin, you have had such a full and rich life with so many inflection points. And I wonder what point of your life, what decision was your biggest yes, required the biggest leap of faith for you?
My biggest yes um, was saying yes to life, saying yes to living. There was no doubt in my mind. I'm a persistent person. If I didn't say yes to living, I would not be here right now. Period.
Life or death, literally.
Literally. I had to say yes to life. I had to say yes to a life that I never valued, never appreciated, and for a very long time I didn't want. So that was the biggest turning point for me. I grew up never feeling accepted in any of the communities or environments that I was in. Never truly feeling accepted. Never truly feeling like I belonged in either. You know, I was either too black for the white kids and administrators at school, or I spoke too proper and was too white for the black kids that I was hanging out with, right? I was never able to just be me, you
Mm,
know? And so going through that, feeling like my father's addiction was a result of my birth, and making things challenging for him, that he didn't just want to escape his circumstances, he wanted to escape his responsibility as a father. Then feeling like my mother had to sacrifice dropping out of college in her junior year because she was pregnant with me and didn't have much support, and then her and I being homeless for like 3 or 4 years. And I say homeless, but really sleeping with, staying with my aunts and uncles and her best friends and all of these things. It was like my life, I felt that I was a burden to everyone and everything in it. Even after having kids, and going through what I went through with my oldest son's mom, and then not being in a good space, when my youngest son was born, and just I felt like everybody's life would be better if I wasn't in it, and then I wouldn't have to deal with the um the guilt of feeling like that burden. And so most of my life I just didn't care if I lived or died, and then society had already told me who I'd be and who I wouldn't be, who I could be and who I couldn't be. They already depicted my death at 18 or 21. And so it was like, well, what do I have then to look forward to? Why do I look forward to 21 when 11 is this bad, when 15 is this bad, when 17 is this bad, right? And it's not getting any better. The distractions just come in, right? There's enough to distract me from my reality that will still persist when that distraction is gone. Why do I want this? And then I'd gotten to that point where, I tried to take it. And as I tried to take it, God kept giving it back to me,
mm.
And so I had to choose. I had to choose and say yes to life, to figure out what was the life God had intended me to live, not the one society told me I would have, or the one that my limited imagination conspired to be, right, or to exist in, but the one God wanted me to live. And I must say, uh, God is an amazing God.
Well, Quentin, man, thank you so much for your time today and your willingness to share your story and your voice and your life with us. I am beyond grateful to you.
I am. The sentiment is shared, my friend. Thank you for the honor. Thank you for creating this platform. This was one of the most important conversations I've ever had publicly. So
Well, thank you.
I
Thank you for
appreciate you.
listening. To those of you who are watching and listening, remember, we all have a voice. Use yours wisely. Thank you.